And the reason I ask this question is because I recall when I was working with a group of students after school, and what I suggested to them, I posed a question to them and I said, when you see your parents, I said, how many of you ask your parents about their day? And some of them looked at me kind of strange, right? Maybe one or two said, oh, I do, I do. Well, I'll never forget this one little boy who he was a third grader. And he said to me, he was looking a little sad. He said to me, he said, well, I want to talk to my dad, but my dad's always on the phone. And I said, oh, he is. He said, yes, he's always on the phone. And I said, well, maybe you all can talk when you're, driving home. He said, no, he's always on the phone. And I said, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. So I thought to myself, okay, God, I'm going to see if I can kind of mention this to his dad. And so the next day, I saw his dad walking up the sidewalk and he was on his phone. So what I did is I walked out the door and just kind of stood there and waited for him. I said, I just wanted to share something with you, before you go inside. So he went ahead and disconnected this call. And he said, what's up? And I told him, I said, we were talking yesterday. I was encouraging the children to um, make sure they ask you guys how your day was. I said, one thing your son said to me, he was a little sad. He said he doesn't get a chance to speak with you because you're always on the phone. And I said, I suggested, I said, well, maybe when you guys are riding home, I said, because I know I do see you, on the phone when you come in. And I said, but you know what? I said, would you consider doing me a favor? And of course, you'll be doing a favor to your son at the same time. I said, is there any way possible you can complete your phone call before you come in the building? And I said, that way, that'll give you guys time to exchange how your day was. And I said, and I know he'll be so happy about that. And he looked at me, he said, oh, he said, you know what? I hadn't really even thought about it, but he's right. I am always on the phone. He said, well, yeah, I'll do that. And so the next day, I saw him walking up the walk, and then he put his phone in his pocket and he came in the door and no phone.